first we have someone on the line right now.
We do.
Yep. We have John Asbury with Newsday.
Excellent. Excellent.
Let's put him on.
Hello, John. Oh, he can't hear me yet, I don't think.
Let's see. Oh, there we go. That'll help right there.
Testing one,
now
two,
we're
three.
good.
There
John, you
go.
can hear us?
Hello, John.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yep, thank you so much.
Excellent. I see. So the story we've got here, John, is this is about Clavin and the Hempstead election, and he's just basically saying he's going to move on with his transition into office. What else can you tell us?
Well, I would say right now that Gillen is not conceding in the race because there are about, I think, 1,500 or 1,300 votes in absentee ballots that have not been counted. Certainly, I think by all accounts, it seems like Clavin is leading and is certainly expected to prevail in this election. But Gillen said she wanted to wait till next week when the absentee ballots are counted to make sure every last vote is counted until she actually concedes.
Right. So now when the Board of Elections says that he won, I don't know, 50% or 51% to 49%, we actually don't have all the votes counted.
All the precinct votes are in, and all the early votes are in, and it's come down to less than 1%.
Right.
And so I think technically Gillen could pursue a recount. I don't know if that's something that she's requested yet or not. I think they're waiting to determine next week. That's a measure that they want to take.
Right.
But all the precinct votes are in. There was something to the effect of almost 1,500, I think 5,500 absentee ballots that have not been counted yet. And the Board of Elections waits until November 12th. And as long as the Board of Elections receives ballots that are postmarked on Election Day by next Tuesday, then those can still be counted. Now, traditionally, these absentee ballots have usually favored Republicans, so that it might be in Clavin's favor as well. But it's sort of the last chance Gillen has to try and eke out anything in this election.
Right. Okay. I mean, initially, I thought I always think it's just a political ploy when they say I'm not. But 5,500 votes that's sizable. A substantial number of votes.
Sure, and I guess you have to follow the direction that this election is taking. It was a very close race. There were several times on election night when the race was virtually tied. Gillen pulled away at one point, actually, with a few thousand vote lead, but by the end of the night, Clavin ended with about a 1,500 vote lead. He said he's very comfortable with that number, and he said he would prevail on the count, and he wants to get to work with his transition team. By all accounts, the Gillen camp is just holding steady. They do have a board meeting on Tuesday where they're not exactly scheduled to discuss the election, but I'm sure it'll probably come up.
Right.
Of course. And you were talking about the absentee ballots. Is there also affidavit ballots or any other types of ballots that are still, again, outstanding? Or like you said, it's just the absentee ballots?
Correct. No, the absentee ballots are counted along with the affidavits.
Okay.
Affidavit ballots being somebody shows up to their polling place and they're not on the rolls. They're still permitted to vote if they sign an affidavit, as long as their affidavit is deemed viable and legitimate, then those are counted alongside the absentees. Anything that these are just votes that weren't included in the voting machines.
Of course. People maybe who were registered somewhere else and didn't get their exact registrations figured out, then sometimes they'll have to sign the affidavit ballot or something and see verified later.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, that's news to me because when you hear the story that people just say, "Oh, Gillen won't concede," people roll their eyes.
Yeah,
they go, come on, but you say 5,500 votes, and I can understand why Clavin wants to move in there and just start.
Of course.
Because he's technically didn't win yet.
Yeah, but at least
that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, well, and Gillen is still in office for another 2 months, so
exactly.
Okay.
She has a little bit of governing left to do.
Right.
When she defeated Tony Santino 2 years ago, he did concede rather quickly after the fact. and she won by a small margin, maybe not this tight, but there was a transition period, and he wasn't entirely cooperative, but she was able to still get in her staff and assume office on January 1st.
Right. Now, what happens when, okay, so somebody concedes and they still have a certain number of votes outstanding. Do they not count them?
I think they're always counted, but usually if you concede, I think it comes to a point that you have a feeling that the affidavits probably aren't going to make a difference. Right. Obviously, there were a lot of races that candidates have conceded in. Republicans took just about every town board seat, minus incumbent Dorothy Gooseby, who's the Democrat for the Uniondale and Hempstead district. But in those races, the margins were in the thousands, not less than 1%.
Right.
Okay. Can you speak to a little bit about the, again, it seems like good showing that the Republicans had out here in Nassau County. It seems like they won some pretty big races and did so throughout, it looked like.
Yeah, it was almost a status quo for the Republicans, with the exception of Hempstead, which they took back. Democrats were always expected to run away with the district attorney. Madeline Singas had every line but the Republican line, including the conservative line, so she won handily by at least 20%.
Okay.
The Democrats were unable to flip any of the Republican legislature seats, so those will still remain the same, and Democrats have a minority in the Nassau County legislature. Democrats were unable to flip Oyster Bay, but then Democrats were able to get a Democratic unanimous board in Glen Cove and also North Hempstead. So there were parts of Nassau County that did go blue, but Hempstead was absolutely it's always sort of been the seat of the Hempstead Republican and Nassau County Party. Joe Cairo really got to get out the vote and grassroots effort that he's been behind for many years in terms of knowing how to win elections in the town of Hempstead, and that's really why Laura Gillen was the first Democrat in more than a century that the Republicans know how to win elections in Hempstead.
Okay. No, it seems that way, so that's why it was more of an outlier, and like you said, it seems to have returned to the way it had been in the past. But, okay, can you also just speak to the general turnout maybe for Nassau County and the off-year election, how we're seeing those numbers?
Yeah, I think it was about as expected.
Okay.
It's first year of early voting, and I think there were Republicans beat out Democrats by 1,000 votes. But it wasn't huge. It was just a couple of thousand people who showed up to the early voting, and so I'm sure both parties will try to get that out in the future. Next year, obviously, being a big presidential election, will be more on the state level versus what you see locally. But this, even though it was an off year nationally in the state, this is a big year for Nassau County because you got all the town races up. Laura Curran, the Nassau County executive, she has another 2 years on her term. So she could probably take a look at this and maybe take some warning signs or take some advice on what to do in her campaign after the next presidential election.
Yeah, seems like a lot of lessons to be learned.
Yeah, wow. So this isn't out of the ordinary.
I mean, I think turnout's always an issue to try and get voters out, especially in local elections. Presidential and national politics always command a lot more attention.
Yeah.
But this was probably pretty routine for a turnout. I think maybe one surprise you did see was the amount of Republicans, and I've been told actually Democrats beat out Republicans in the town of Hempstead for the first time ever. But nonetheless, they knew how to get the Republican votes out where they needed to.
Yeah, they won their bases.
Wantagh and Levittown, Garden City, and the five towns all turned very strongly out for Don Clavin.
Okay. So yeah, their outreach was targeted and looks like it did what they wanted it to do then.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And then just last question about the early voting. Just generally, I've been hearing from both in Suffolk and in Nassau County and in the city, there haven't been, thankfully, too many major issues with the early voting process. Is that correct, you'd say, in Nassau, too, that generally, obviously some hiccups the first time around, but nothing major glaring problems, right?
Yeah, I think for the most part, voting went okay. I know in a few polling places on Election Day there were concerns about this is the first time that the county in Long Island has switched to iPads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so
for the sign-ins, yep.
They were on a wireless server, and there were points where they had difficulty getting data back to the Board of Elections. Eventually, I think all the votes were cast and counted, but there were maybe some delay in getting to that information.
Yeah, but at least it was on the back end, not on the front end. At least the data was still preserved,
exactly.
Of course, yeah. Okay. That's
good
to hear.
I know the Democrats would certainly like to expand early voting.
Yeah.
It was only in a select number of polling places. For example, there was only one polling place in the town of Huntington. There was no polling place in the city of Long Beach. So this was sort of the first test case, and I know it was sort of thrust on the state and communities to do this after it was approved at the state level. So maybe could be expanded in future years.
Okay, yeah, no, that's definitely going to be something to keep following, and like you said, see where those sites are and how that plays into the elections and the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. Well, if the percentages go up in general, then I guess at least the perception will be it's working.
Yeah, anything that gets more people out there, like you said. So
I think almost anything that makes it easier for people to vote. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, but what was it, 25%?
What was it about again? Yeah, the full turnout for the county. Do you know offhand?
I'm not sure offhand. Sounds about right, though.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's, obviously always pretty low proportionally to the actual voting, able population. But, we'll take small baby steps, I guess, in the direction we can.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, John.
Of course. Thanks for having me, and good luck.
Yep, take care.
Yeah,
exactly.
All right.
Thank you very much. Bye. Well, we want to thank John Asbury for coming on and talking to us. We always want to thank Newsday, always for making the reporters available.